Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for your endurance and stamina late afternoon. Yeah, the one piece of good news. Now, my presentation is called "Covered Bonds on Bloomberg," but there's two pieces of good news. First, I'm not trying to sell you a Bloomberg terminal. With the exception, potentially, Richard, we might want to discuss, it's been some time, yeah, you might benefit. But secondly, also, even if you don't use Bloomberg regularly, and maybe even if you haven't ever sat in front of a Bloomberg terminal, there will be some takeaways from my presentation for you as well. So let's take a look. I will already say there is a lot in terms of covered bonds on Bloomberg. It's not a new asset class, obviously, to Bloomberg. We've been covering, I should think, since the mid-90s, this market consistently, and we have complete coverage on the public global covered bond market. What we've been doing maybe in the last 4 or 5 years, we've increased the focus a little bit more on the asset class, so there have been new developments dating even further back, I should say maybe 8, 9, 10 years. We, for example, included a look-through and a view on cover pools for individual covered bonds. Those of you using the Bloomberg, you know, on our description pages, DES, you can find cover pool information, etc., etc. So just to make that statement, the asset class of covered bonds is important to us, and we are also looking to improve quite a few number of things in the upcoming years. Now, I need to be very quick because, as I said, there is a lot on Bloomberg, and I'm not going to make the attempt to interpret or analyze the data sets that I've found for you. I will just give you a quick glance for you to get a bit of a flavor to understand where could we be looking if in case we sit in front of a Bloomberg terminal. So an easy start, finding covered bonds on Bloomberg. How do I find them? There is the Bloomberg search functionality for bonds or fixed income search, SRCH, and that nowadays, I mean, even in the Bloomberg world, you can imagine AI is a very important topic, and we've included that also in our search functionality. I can just type SRCH covered bonds in euro, and thank God we understand that. So immediately our search says euro currency, covered bonds is covered, yes, and this here is essentially the search output. This is all customizable. We've also introduced the ECB covered bond label on here as well. Collateral, is it mortgages, is it public loans, depending on what you would like to see. First step done, we found covered bonds on Bloomberg. Next, we can drill down deeper. Within that search functionality, there is also a matrix tab, which from my experience, many of our users are not really using that. I find it very powerful because immediately from a search result with thousands of bonds, I think this search had 4,300 bonds, yeah? Global universe active at the moment of covered bonds on Bloomberg around 7,200. So I can drill deeper and I say, for example, split me up that result into the bonds depending on country of risk or country of incorporation, yeah? And what I see here, 2025 issuance in Germany, that is in euro, 22.6 billion euros. And again, I can look at my results and use that to analyze further. However, then looking further into the past, 22 issuance, 58, that is not accurate. I would be making a mistake here. Which mistake might I be making? Well, here in my search, I'm looking at active bonds, yeah, but let's not forget those bonds issued in 2022, some of them may already have matured. But there is a simple thing that I do in my search. Here, where it says bonds, I can select please include matured. I can run the same search, and that enables me, for example, to create issuance statistics over the years, which I've done here, for example, covered bonds issuance in Germany, and I dated that back to 2016, and I also introduced, well, let's take a look at those bonds issued in non-euro currency, yeah? Did the same thing here in my matrix tab in the search. I see here, well, this year we had 280 million, that is, in USD this year, and 170 in SEK, yeah? So again, I can use that opportunity to create backward-looking historical charts if I want to do so. I've created some more, I will not comment a lot. One aspect I would like to comment on is what I introduced here. As you see this yellow line in my charts, this is for global covered bond issuance, European, outside of Europe, and here we look at different currencies. This line here, the yellow one, is always the ratio between euro versus non-euro. Yeah? And that I found quite interesting because you can observe some trends. So on the global issuance side, you see here we had a bit of a dip coming down into the COVID period, and now euro has been gaining importance again in the market. Also same view on the European side. Interesting, then ex-Europe, we had a very large dip into non-euro issuance in the 2020 year. And when we then look at the currencies that are mostly issued in non-euro, red bar here or red column is dollar. So dollar issuance was high in 22 and 23, much lower in 24. SEK issuance typically on a high level, lower in 24. Again, I will leave the interpretation to you because you are the experts. I'm just the person bringing the data to you. Now, issuance is one thing, but often we would also like to see that in the context of upcoming maturities. Also, that can be easily done, and again, with the same function as RCH. In this case, I built again my search that I would like to use. Here I said search covered bonds issued in Europe in EUR. But instead of going to the results, I'm going down here where it says DDIS, debt distribution. Now, DDIS is a functionality. If you use the Bloomberg, you typically use that on an individual issuer, but you can also use it on a search result. So basically you are saying that whole search result that I have, I would like to analyze that in terms of upcoming maturities. And this is the output that I get. So you see here Q2, Q4, and so on. Yeah, I see the upcoming maturities for my covered bond universe. What I can then do on top, I can say add criteria. I run another search, and what I did here is, please give me the SSA bonds issued in Europe in EUR. And immediately I get a comparison. Down here I've got my SSA upcoming maturities. Up here I've got my covered bond upcoming maturities. So with a few easy clicks, yeah, you get to quite what I would think valuable results. Now, different topic, Bloomberg Intelligence. You might have heard about our group of market experts. I think it's 300 to 400 nowadays already. Bloomberg Intelligence has been existing now for almost 10 years. And Bloomberg Intelligence is that department, the only department at Bloomberg who can really have and share an opinion. Yeah? You may know that we are also a news agency, so we are not really allowed to have our own opinion. The colleagues in Bloomberg Intelligence, they are allowed to have their opinion. And we've made a recent acquisition. Our colleague Reto Bachmann, who has joined Bloomberg around beginning or end of last year, he has started also issuing a monthly newsletter, so to say, on the covered bond asset class. He issued the first one up here that came out end of March, so looking forward to see his April edition, and that can be found, it's a bit difficult to find, BISTRTE, that's Strategy Europe, yeah, and he took a look in his first edition mainly at development of spreads, and he also used, you see here, to put emphasis on what he was talking about, he used some of the Bloomberg covered bond indices, yeah, and that already my next topic, Bloomberg indices. We have quite a large number of indices that we calculate and administer in-house also on the asset class of covered bonds. Now I'm aware that there are other indices out there, IVOX indices, very important, yeah, that people tend to look at. I will, however, say, if you might be looking for an alternative or maybe a different flavor, it is definitely worth taking a look at our indices. Our colleagues, well, not our colleagues, but we know, not a lot of you know them, NordLB, Fred Kunze and his team, the researchers, in their latest edition of their monthly covered bond and SSA report, they have actually committed an entire page almost to findings that they found or that they gathered from Bloomberg index analysis. Because there's a lot you can do with this data. I put two of these indices here, that the first one Euro aggregate and the second one pan-European, yeah. And what you can easily do, for example, you can monitor with the help of these indices the outstanding amount in that market as defined by the index criteria. Now, news, but bit from a different angle, now more focusing on the primary markets. Yeah? If I want to understand what's happening in the primary market, announcements, mandates, guidance, yeah, there is FIRS, Bloomberg First Word. And when you run that for the first time, your settings may not be quite right, and you get all sorts of news, yeah, all different asset classes, FX, equities that you might not want to know about. It's important to set the correct market focus. You can do that in FIRS under Actions, select Market Focus, and I chose an example here. I said European debt capital markets, financials, SSA, new issues. And this is the output that I got, well, part of the output. So I looked at that last week and I saw, well, last week we had Skipton Building Society coming out with a new covered bond. So I added to my filter here Skipton, and here, very nicely, I can see what I would have seen had I had FRS running, the news that would have been brought to me. So initially on the 23rd, mandate information came out, Skipton to issue a 5-year covered bond. On the next day, guidance, SONIA plus 62 area, some updates on the guidance, and then the next day, 24th, final terms and final pricing, SONIA plus 57, yeah? And these updates are really real time, as fast as we can get them. That is also thanks to our news colleagues who are in contact with the market, with issuers, with lead managers, etc., etc. Digging a little bit deeper into that news story that was also linked to the Skipton deal, there is enrichment in the sense that initial information is also given. Here in the green box, I thought that was a quite relevant piece. Year-to-date sales of covered bonds have now fallen even further, and so on and so on. Also a comment on the ECB and its holdings of covered bonds. That can be found in our covered bond newsletter, NI Cov Wrap. This is a weekly newsletter coming out every Friday and essentially summarizing what has happened throughout the week in the covered bond market, and it often has quite useful links to other statistics here, for example, the ECBC index of covered bond holdings. Further on the news story, again on the Skipton topic, and on the point of enrichment, what I, as an investor, typically would also like to know is, well, if this bond is coming to market in the preliminary issuance stage, where is it going to land in the market against the own issuer's curve, for example? We're going to talk a little bit about relative value. That also is possible, this analysis, directly here, for example, from the news story. He says here, NIA, that's our new issue assessment functionality, and you see a small screenshot of that here. The red dot here is the Skipton new issuance. It sits slightly above the Skipton curve that we've drawn here, and as comparison I put a TSB bank curve. So easily you can understand, once a bond is announced to the market, where is it going to land, is there any new issue premium, etc., connected to that issuance. Yet again, another topic, league tables. And I will say here, I hold my hands up a little bit, the Bloomberg covered bond league tables are, and I will be quite honest with you, in the market currently not really perceived as the standard, yeah. We would like to get there. We are perceived as the standard in other asset classes. Unfortunately, not so much in the covered bond area, and that's certainly also down to, and we had this conversation at a covered bond event we ran ourselves in our Frankfurt office the other day, because the criteria we are using at the moment are not quite the criteria the broad market would be looking at. For example, we are including deals already size 35 million. The other league tables may only start from sub-benchmark 250 or even benchmark size. They may also differentiate by currency. At the moment, we don't do that. But in the league side of things, and you see here at the top, it's got this bold B for Bloomberg table. I also have the opportunity to edit these criteria, and then you see an asterisk here. Yeah? So asterisk means I edited my own criteria. So what I did here, for example, I said currency, I want to look at euro. I want to look at instruments only 250 and higher. Also, of course, we need to exclude retained deals and all these type of things. Yeah, but immediately you get the output of the lead managers, arrangers that were involved. Maybe that is more to your liking or what you perceive to be a better reflection of the market. There's more things you can do inside of Leak, also with the added benefit that Leak gives you also graphical outputs. Here, this example on top is looking back over the years, who were the main or the number one lead managers, what were the volumes in terms of issuance, what was the number of deals, yeah? So lots to play with if you want to commit some time. Now, covered bond data sets, again, a bit of a different topic, and I mentioned it initially. We've been building our database on the covered bond side in the last 5 to 10 years, and we are still looking always to include additional interesting data points, maybe nowadays also more on the ESG side of things. Yeah. What we have done recently was we added the Bloomberg FIGI, our Financial Instruments Global Identifier, to cover pools. And that was also last year already adopted in the HTT templates as a mandatory field of information for the time being, such that these pools, which sometimes the naming conventions can be a bit confusing. This one here is a HCOP ship covered bond. Yeah. So to make these pools essentially unique by assigning one unique identifier. And what we can then do with this identifier, we can then also take a look, and here I'm at the Bloomberg DES description page of this bond. I can also take a look at, well, which other bonds have been issued out of that pool. Yeah, and I see there is 5 bonds in total issued out of this ship fund private pool by HCOP. Other fields, well, not worth digging in now, but one comment, I think Ken, not there, he said that earlier, he said, well, it would be really good to understand how many green bonds have been issued out of a pool and how many others, yeah. Again, with that FIGI on Bloomberg now, you can easily find that information, because the pool, you can use it in the SRCH search functionality, so you could say, please search for this pool, and give me all those bonds, and then flag to me which were green and which were not. So that exercise, as long as you know your way around on Bloomberg, you can actually do it on our platform. Regulatory data sets, also important. We heard the announcement from the PRA on the 8th. Richard, you're more knowledgeable on these things than I am. I think they pulled back a little bit in the meantime, yeah. But with regards to LCR and HQLA, also these data sets we offer. Here there is a group of experts on our side behind that. They speak to regulators, they speak to the market to understand, you know, how do we need to interpret certain rules. And then they offer these final data sets to say, what is HQLA EU eligible asset class number 1 here, for example, or under FRTB, what is the risk weight, etc., etc. And these data sets can then be used internally, yeah, in databases, etc., etc. This is just an example of how that group does that. They are looking here. This is an example bond. They say, okay, security type covered bond, in pool, ING, and so on. And they look through the relevant information that then allows them to determine which HQLA level is this meant to be falling into. Some more statistics, I will browse through them, but just to showcase what you can do with the data that you are able to find on our system. This is an overview quarters from 24 to 25 Q1, looking again at European covered bonds in red versus SSA issuance over the quarters. Here, in terms of benchmark covered bonds, what has the issuance been? Well, it's been going downwards throughout the last year, and then as we are used to that, a stronger Q1, however, not as strong as the previous Q1 in 24. Average tenors issued, interesting, we saw a dip in that, coming down from almost 7 years, an average tenor, down to under 5 in Q4 24, now on the rise a little bit again. Coverage ratio, and here certainly reflection of the strong investor desire for covered bonds at the moment. We've seen book ratios exceeding 3.5%, 3.5 times in the Q1 25. Similar picture also there in terms of tightening, stronger tightening towards final pricing in Q1 25, and that aligned with lower issuance premium. In fact, an issuance, well, not a premium, the reverse, whatever that might be. So we've seen negative numbers towards the issuer's own curve. And interesting also to observe issuance mid-swaps and benchmark numbers, and these been coming closer and closer together. Looking to get to the end, last topic, relative value. We've got a very powerful functionality on Bloomberg, which has almost become many people's favorite function, and they keep on playing with it, FIW, the fixed income worksheet. I will say, for those of you who are not familiar with it or have never used it, it's a bit dangerous. When I used it the first few times, I was ready to throw my keyboard out the window, yeah, because you need to be a little bit of an expert to understand what buttons do I need to click to make this work. But for a starter's introduction, again, everything starts with search. Yeah? So here, I take an example from the German market. Give me bonds issued by Münchner Hypothekenbank. And down here, instead of going to the results, I've got the opportunity to go to relative value, FIW. This is the page that I get, and there is different tabs. Here, for example, a list. And here, immediately, I can do a relative value comparison to say, I chose cheese bread over the last 3 months. And here we always have these graphs on Bloomberg. The blue dot is always where we are at now, and the red one is the average over the last 3 months. So immediately I can see all these bonds by Münchner Hypothekenbank, they have been widening out over the last 3 months. Now, and this is particularly nice, charts, you know, and we like these bubbles on our system, every bubble always showing you one individual bond. And what I've done here, and I find this particularly powerful because this is a real market, yeah, I can go in there and can say market now. I'll use a live pricing source, and it gives me the information as the market stands at that moment in time. I've got different options to group within our fixed income worksheet. Here I said issuer, well, that's Munich Hypothekenbank. And then I said, please also group by payment rank, because I was curious to see, well, in terms of the different issuances by Münchner Hypothekenbank, in terms of payment ranks, how do they differentiate in terms of market levels, looking at, in this example, yield versus maturity, yeah? So here, every curve has a different color. The green curve is the covered bonds. Blue here, I've got the seniors. And then we've got yellow, that is senior non-preferred, and at the top I've got subordinated. And I can even add a comparison. I said, please also add as a comparison the LBBW secured curve, which is down here. Here, an example. Today we've been talking about that a lot. Green, ESG. I then said, okay, now I want to look at sustainable instruments. And what is the result then? I got a green curve and I got a red curve, and I could immediately jump to the conclusion, okay, there is clearly a very significant greenium that I have detected here in Münchner Hypothekenbank. However, I may have made a mistake, because look here, second picture, it's the same from above. I clicked this box, please also show me the issuance size, the amount, yeah? And immediately these two curves align. You see the bubbles, they got bigger. So I could have easily made a mistake here, but by introducing also the size of these bonds in the market that I looked at, I basically identified that, okay, it was not really a greenium. This pretty much all aligns. It was more off-market pricing for those very small bonds that are out there in the market. Yeah. Lastly, on the greenium, because it's just been interesting over the years, you know, is there a greenium, is there not a greenium, how large may it be? I actually ran a search on all European covered bonds in euro, same outcome. And with all these bubbles, I got confused. Right mouse click, I say, show me the curves only. And now actually I get, you know, I would say a good result in terms of greenium. Looking at non-green versus green bonds, yeah, you might want to call it 8 basis points. This is a different view on it. You see the non-green bonds, they go higher up in yield versus the green ones. So I think from this analysis, and if you are interested in that aspect of things, you know, you can conclude a greenium is detectable, but sometimes you need to look longer to find it. Last topic, curves, always an interesting one. At Bloomberg, we've got our BVAL, Bloomberg Fair Valuation, independent curves. They are fixed once a day, and they are quite helpful if I want to run general comparisons, this market versus the other, issuer versus sector, and so on. Yeah, so we have two parts, sector curves and issuer curves. Here I've chosen 4, these are sector curves, so I said Germany covered bonds, France covered, Italy covered, and Belgium covered. Click one go down here, and I get to my result. And what is the result here? Green curve at the bottom, so the German covered bonds yielding the lowest. Next is Belgium in this example. then there is France, and at the top in red we've got Italy. Interesting maybe to state, the French curve cuts the Italian one here in the longer maturity range. Same example here, and this is always the one people tend to look at. What about KfW and EU bonds? Yeah, that picture has changed a little bit over the last few weeks, but making that comparison, down here I've got the German Bund curve. These two curves here are EU and KfW, and the covered bonds sit up here. And what I can find is that the German covered bond curve in green is just getting close to the EU curve in the longer end. Again, that picture, it used to be a bit different when we looked like 2 or 3 weeks ago, but also that you can change. Of course, you can compare going backwards in history. That brings me to the end. I hope I haven't, completely, given you too much information, so you're all completely exhausted now, yeah, but thank you very much for your attention.